All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm so delighted that you're joining us this afternoon, and I appreciate the time. I know teaching time is quite valuable right now, so thank you for taking the time to join us. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that I'm joining you today from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish nations of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. Just a quick reminder that we are recording this session, so if you want to turn your cameras off, and keep your microphones muted. That would be so appreciated. As you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Paul's keeping an eye on the chat for me today, and I'll try to answer them as we go. If not, I will answer them in the question and answer session at the end of our webinar today. So a little bit about me, because I'm always interested in everyone's journey to adult education and English as an additional language is always so interesting. I actually started out as a history and a theater teacher myself and was working with an EAL program in high school, and I fell in love with EAL, and that inspired me to go ahead and do my TESOL certification. And there was a one-day seminar about LINC. And from that one-day seminar, I knew that I wanted to teach LINC, and I was very fortunate to find a LINC job fairly quickly. And since then, that's almost 10 years ago now, I've been able to teach at private and public school district and post-secondary LINC environments, everything from LINC 2 to LINC 8. So I've been teaching this transitions program since 2015, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about it with you today. So an overview of our program today. Today we'll be taking a look at the history and context. So what our program is and what led to the development of transitions, the initial goals of our transitions program, and also how we developed the course and the curriculum for transitions, the challenges and the benefits that we've had over the years, and some of the responsive revisions we've had to make to the course as a result, and the ongoing challenges and benefits that we still have, some possible applications and adaptations for your setting or your provider, and hopefully some key takeaways that you'll leave with today, and then of course an opportunity for some questions and answers as well. Okay, so the context. So I work for a medium-sized school district to how transitions was developed as well. So prior to the introduction of EduLink, our program was already using Moodle, our own Moodle platform, and we were offering a number of blended classes. We also had several instructors who were early adapters of the Learn IT to Teach training, which was key as well. Then along came PBLA. Now, as PBLA was looming and we were offering those blended courses and we had continuous intake, a problem developed. And our instructors were vocal with our administration about the challenge they were facing. And that challenge was supporting learners and blended teachers in a year-round continuous intake learning environment. It was really difficult for students to join blended classes that were already operating at full pace. It had impact on our attendance and our retention. And what we found was that it wasn't that students didn't want to be in blended classes. They found the joining of the class process very difficult and very difficult to adjust to. So how could we help those learners? So our administrator was wonderful. She sat down with us and we set some initial goals. And the goals were to apply for additional funding for a course that would offer a supportive introduction to the learning management system. Of course, at that time, it was EduLink. So this is in the year 2015. We were looking to help our learners build digital skills. One of the things we noticed was a lot of our newcomers didn't have what we would consider basic digital skills or knowledge. We would also be offering an introduction to the new curriculum. So everyone can and probably remember what it felt like when PBLA first came along. It was overwhelming, and it was overwhelming for instructors and students. And we wanted to address those issues around blended student retention and program attendance requirements. And of course, from our administration perspective, they also saw this as a wonderful opportunity. They could maximize the use of free classroom spaces and free daycare spaces and keep our funder very happy. So it was a win-win-win-win for everyone. So approaching the curriculum development, we were granted our funding in the summer of 2015, and we began with the goal of setting up the course for that September. So the first thing that was done was all teachers using EduLink completed a survey. And that survey asked them to consider what features of EduLink they were using in class, what they used on a regular basis, and what they just used occasionally. Then the next step was having individual and group discussions with blended teachers. So I took time with each of the blended teachers, and fortunately that meant also taking time with myself. I was teaching a blended class at that time. So I had some insight into the process. And we again talked about how were we using EduLink? How were our classes structured? What were the areas of need for these students? And then the other consideration, of course, was allowing for a range of digital literacy skills. We were seeing quite a broad range, actually. We had students with very basic to no digital knowledge, and we had students who were quite adept at technology. So how could we accommodate all of those students within the same course? And then, of course, it was also considered an opportunity to introduce LINC and to introduce PDLA. So we could introduce program expectations, things around attendance, classroom norms, structures, anything like that could also be a part of transitions. So there was a lot to work with there. So this is the first version we came up with, Transitions 1.0. We initially started off at about 5 weeks. I'm going to say 5 weeks-ish because each group was a little bit different. It was a bi-weekly class, so we had space available twice a week because of the blended class schedule. So those classes were at that point 75% in person, 25% online. So I was taking advantage of 2 available online rooms at that time. All of our classes actually were face-to-face, and we rotated through a schedule of LINC 4.5, LINC 5.6, and LINC 7.8. Now this was because all our stage 2 classes are actually split classes, and we had 1 LINC 4 blended class as well. The priority was given to current students moving from non-blended to blended classes, and then spaces were opened up to our wait list. We had space for 12 students in each class. If you're considering this class, I would say 12 is probably the maximum. Each day I would definitely get my steps as I zoomed around between 12 computers and 12 tablets. It was any larger than that, I think, would be quite challenging in these circumstances. In terms of curriculum, we had quite a broad focus. So we talked about that LINC overview, that idea of class norms and structures and attendance. We introduced blended learning as a concept, and then overviewed the EduLink website and how different teachers used it. And that would include things like additional blocks like Quizlet and Kahoot, other features that teachers were using. Then we would move on to communication, so focusing on messages, online chat, discussion forums. And then we would open up into learning strategies. So taking a look at the 4 skills, practicing how those skills were used in the classroom, going through cycles of skill using and skill building. And so they were getting almost an authentic LINC classroom experience while being introduced to EduLink and how it was used in the class. Then we would also take a look at, of course, our CLBs, and we would build our About Me's for our portfolio. We would also have an overview of PDLA, and we would set up our binders before we went to our new class. To finish it all off, we had an in-person assessment where the students completed a mock class with a variety of activities in a certain period of time. Okay, so the initial benefits. One of the most wonderful things, right away, we saw measurable improvements in attendance and retention. We could clearly see it in our attendance, how the students were staying in classes, They were comfortable once they joined their blended classes. That was fantastic. It gave us time to identify student needs really individually as well. We could anticipate those needs and deal with particular issues in transitions prior to them joining their class. We were also able to get a lot of feedback from the students about how they felt it was a safe space. They could have this low risk environment where they could make mistakes and they could learn about the LMS and they could ask a lot of questions in a way that they didn't necessarily feel like asking in a new class when they were the only new student or one of two new students. This gave them that safe space to really be free to explore the LMS. So the feedback, the end of course feedback from the students was quite strong in favor of the program. The feedback from the blended teachers was generally quite strong as well. They were happy with the level of skill the students were coming with. It was helping them. The students could ease into their PBLA rotations and their modules. They understood what was happening. It wasn't challenging. And of course, management was delighted because all of our classroom spaces were full and all of our daycare spaces were being used. So those are the benefits. Now, I'm interested in hearing what you think our challenges might have been with that initial class structure and that initial idea. So if I can ask everyone just to take a moment to think about that and maybe post some thoughts in the chat that you feel comfortable sharing. So thinking about what I've just told you about, what do you think our challenges were? And even what do you think, what challenges you might have offering a similar program to that first version of transition? Okay, I'm seeing students with different levels, so different digital literacies, absolutely. Different types of devices. So in our location, students were bringing their own devices. Wi-Fi connection, absolutely. Another Wi-Fi there. Yeah, so keeping that class size. It has been a luxury to have just 12 students, absolutely. We'll talk about how it could be possibly expanded to a larger size for sure. And I think maybe once we talk about the revisions that we made. There were a lot of challenges with this. The length of the program, yes, Vesna, absolutely. The length, definitely. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and oh, new intake, yes. And especially as I mentioned, the continuous intake was a big piece as well. All right, I'm gonna share some of our challenges now. And I think there's some of the things that have already been mentioned here. Okay, from a student perspective, as Vesna mentioned, the length of the program. So 5 weeks is a long time to be in an introductory course. Students are quite anxious to get started in LINC. So that was one source of feedback from them. They really wanted to get going. They were only getting one assessment from this class. They were looking to really get on with their LINC experience. So the Wi-Fi devices were also a concern. So we were able to address this by offering devices in our classroom on site, and we were only face-to-face at that time. When students went home, we would work with the students. If they didn't have a device at home, of course, in pre-COVID times, we had a lot of wonderful options being in a metro area in terms of library access for Wi-Fi and computer access at the libraries, different opportunities like that. I'll also talk a little bit about some community options as well. So that was a big challenge. For the teachers themselves, having a space open for 5 weeks, again, the length was a big concern. Of course, we know IRCC likes to see our classes nice and full. So to have that space sitting there for 5 weeks is a long time, especially if your class has a lower attendance level. For our clerical staff, we had created a whole new level of work. Now, for a medium-sized program, we have one clerical person who does all of our clerical work. And we just asked her to take on a whole new registration process and a whole new student movement process every 5 weeks. So that was a challenge as well. And that clerical person was also moving children in and out of daycare. So it was a lot of extra work for that person. The curriculum, I'm surprised no one mentioned this one. The curriculum was rather enthusiastic. I can say that with the benefit of hindsight. We had huge, beautiful, lofty goals, and then we realized we might have tried to do a little too much for an introduction to blended learning course. So we had to trim the curriculum, and that would also help with the length of the program as well. And the other issue is our on-site daycare. So the parents in the crowd here today will know what it's like when you drop your child off at daycare for the very first time. Some of those children wander off right away, but some of those children are not so enthusiastic about the experience. And we had a lot of parents being pulled out of class and having to go and see their child in daycare, and then they would come back and they missed a lot, and it would slow down the pace of the class as well. So we needed to do some revision. So one of the things, and I can't stress this enough about this class and this position, is really just the communication piece. So sitting down again with the administration, with our clerical staff, with our blended teachers, and talking about how we could make some changes. So first round of revisions. The first round of revisions was a very interesting process. So the first thing we could do was really simple. We adjusted the daycare orientation. We added additional days, so parents came earlier and they gave their time for their children to adjust. The curriculum changes was a larger piece. We had to really think about what was necessary. The first thing we did was remove the learning strategies. We removed a lot of the pieces around what a class structure looks like, and instead decided to focus on how the LMS is used in the classroom. That immediately cut our curriculum significantly. Scheduling change. The other piece was we had set the class up as face-to-face, thinking that that was the most important piece. But a lot of the class time was also being used with the students just simply practicing online. So we switched it to a format that better reflected the blended format. We were still using those 2 days on site, but we added 2 online days. And that also sped up the process as well. So we shifted from a bi-weekly face-to-face program to a fully part-time morning or evening program. And then we also tried a full day program as well too. And we were able to cut the class time down to about 2.5 to 3 weeks at that point, which really helped. It helped with student movement, and it helped the students feel like they were making progress, and it helped the teachers feel less worried about the spaces in their class. Then we faced a first obstacle. So this is in the first 2 years of the course. Our hours were cut within our contract. So we went from being the equivalent of a part-time class to less than a part-time class. And we had to limit what we were offering in terms of the class, which was very disappointing. But then in the next 2 years, what we saw as a result was our wait list grew exponentially and our hours were then restored. So that was wonderful. We then also took the piece about orientation, introducing students to LINC, and we had orientation for all new students. So instead of putting that on transitions, sorry, I'm just laughing at Paul's comment there, absolutely classic IRCC. We introduced students to what the blended program was, how long they would be in transition, and also our new literacy classes as well. So the students were then self-selecting the classes they were going to. They were choosing the option of transition, And it was a lot clearer to them what LINC expectations were, what the attendance policy was, and all of that was removed from the course curriculum, which again addressed our issue around timeline and allowed us to speed up the course. Of course, the other big shift in this time frame was the shift from EduLink to Avenue. Now, most of us would say that, the activities are fairly the same. It looks beautiful. I love it. But the biggest shift, of course, was e-portfolios. So it also reduced the time we were spending on binder setup and filing systems to now the quick and easy, lovely e-portfolios. So those were the biggest curriculum changes that we undertook. Again, we now got the class time down to about an average of 2 to 2.5 weeks at this point. And again, that's rotating through part-time offerings or even full-time offerings at different times of day for LINC 5 and 6. Everyone's favorite obstacle, of course, our obstacle was COVID. So we had shifted to a blended format to reflect the blended format that the students would be going into. And then, of course, along came COVID, and we had to shift completely online, which brought its own unique sense of challenges. Okay? All the things we had relied on doing face-to-face, we now had to adapt to Zoom, of course. So here is our most recent version of Transitions. This brings us to Transitions 2021. We're about 2.5 weeks-ish. It's a weekly part-time or full-time online class, of course, because of the pandemic, but usually it's 50-50 blended. We offer it to LINC 5, 6 and to LINC 7, 8. Priority is still given to current students moving from non-blended to blended classes, and we're still offering 12 students a class. We've been able to maintain that, fortunately. The curriculum looks a little bit different. There's a piece, an introduction to Avenue, setting up an account and talking about blended learning. But again, you'll see a lot of that overview of LINC is now gone. The first unit focuses on that introduction to learning and communicating online. Again, messaging, forums, online chat. The second unit is the larger unit. It's sample activities of all the activities that our blended teachers have identified that they use. So again, there's this constant reflective practice, going back to the blended teachers every few months. How are things going? Have you changed how you're using the LMS? Is there something new or something different that you're using? How are you structuring your class right now with COVID? All of that information is informing the curriculum. We're still taking a look at our portfolios. Of course, with e-portfolios, that's a lot easier. And then we build our About Me section before you're sent off to your blended class. And again, we had to remove that in-person assessment. We could no longer offer that because, of course, we're not in person. So now it's just a reflective ongoing assessment that the teacher provides. But at least it's their first introduction to PBLA. So overall benefits. Over the 5 years of these adjustments and this experience and all those revisions, it's been quite the process, and it's really been an enjoyable one. I would say the best part is that it is inclusive, and by that I mean, and I think I'm probably singing to the choir here, but we all know that blended classes are a form of equity and access. So our students who can't meet the regular attendance requirements because of work commitments or family commitments, now they're able to do so through our blended learning programs. And that's invaluable. And Transitions opens that up and allows students who wouldn't usually be able to attend blended classes because they don't have the digital skills, or they don't feel like they're comfortable on a computer. They need some encouragement. This opens the door for them. So it increases access, it removes obstacles and barriers, and it's really responsive to student needs, which is also the most important part, I think. It sets up our students for success. So it builds those skills and it offers opportunity for extension. So all those skills that they're learning in Transitions in our blended classes, we know they're going out and using in the real world. We know they're valuable for settlement. We know they're valuable when they have to interact with their child's teacher, or when they're applying for a job, or when they're navigating government forms. All those things are valuable, and Transitions and EduLink, Avenue really open the door there. And it strives for excellence. So by removing the obstacles and barriers, by opening the doors to students who wouldn't normally be included in these type of programs, we're encouraging students to see bigger and to move outside their comfort zone. It's a challenge, but there's no greater reward than seeing a student succeed. And to start off with a student who comes to you and says, I'm not very good at computers, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And 2 weeks later, they're walking out the door confident. They know they can do this. They know they can be a blended student, and they're happy to be a blended student as well. So possible adaptations. So our work environment is a little bit different with the continuous intake. If you don't have continuous intake, you might be able to offer transitions in a different way. We're also a unionized environment, which has impact on how our staff gets contracts. So you might be able to staff your classes a little bit differently if you're not a unionized environment. There's lots of different factors. The biggest thing I would say is, what do your students need? How can you set them up for success? What do your instructors need for support? And what opportunities are in your program? Do you have unused spaces, unused schedule time, daycare spaces? Do you have instructors with digital skills that are eager to share them? There's all sorts of opportunities, and you want to think about that time frame. So perhaps you're an institution that offers terms. So maybe you have a longer time frame to work with. You could offer an introduction to blended learning course over a longer period of time. It could be possible. You could also be offering it for a shorter time frame before the start of your term as an introductory course. Modules versus courses. So taking a look at, can we divide these ideas up into modules that teachers then teach throughout the term? I think the most important thing here is we know that teachers have had to do this under pandemic circumstances, but it's not necessarily sustainable in the long term with PDLA. So how can we find a way to support instructors with these type of modules that are easier or smaller chunks for them to use? You can also consider streams and levels. So because we're a smaller program, probably in the scale, we can only offer one transition class, but if you were a larger institution, perhaps you could offer different levels of transition type programming. An introductory course for those with lower skills, for some that have higher level of skills but just need more practice. And of course, there's always a self-paced module option. This is something we're actually working with right now. I'm trying this a little bit. Been dabbling with my last group, hoping that we can try out at least some portions of a self-paced module to see if that also offers other opportunities for timing. So the key takeaways, the things that I hope that you leave today and are a reflection on what we have learned and what we can share of our mistakes and our challenges and our joys. I would say the first thing is to communicate and consult with your instructors and your students. I was really fortunate to be given this opportunity, but all the success from this class has come from a collaborative effort. It's really about communication. It's really about consulting stakeholders. And when everyone's involved, then that's when it's successful. Offer opportunities for success for all. So again, this is coming back to that idea of access and equity. Initially, when we first started this program, there was a lot of reluctance to put some students in it. People often were labeled, or I was told, oh, that student doesn't know anything about computers. They can't be a blended student. No, 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 no. And I really want to encourage us to look past that. I always said, doesn't matter, even if they don't have an email address, send them to me. I will help them create an email address. we really want to treat it as a point of equity and access for everyone. And I think that's the most important part. It should be seen as a bridging program. The responsive curriculum. So shape the course to the identified needs, not the larger ideal. This was a hard lesson to learn for us. You saw in the beginning our big ideas about what we wanted the course to be. It's easy to see how this could be a full semestered course with modules on digital citizenship and building basic skills and all sorts of applications. Unfortunately for our program, that doesn't meet our needs, so it's not possible, but it could be for yours. So really thinking about your particular program, what your needs are, and what your students' needs are as well. So make transitions and blended classes a part of the overall vision for your program. And I think this also has value in if we're thinking about what our programs are doing to introduce digital literacy at all levels. And we know, I've seen across Canada that there are people doing amazing things with digital literacy at lower levels. So it can be done. And I think if we're looking at transitions as a part of that, as a piece of that, but we're also talking about, okay, at this level, all our students should be able to do X, and building those skills in from the very lowest levels. That's really important too. Thinking about what other pieces our programs can offer. So the example of orientation. Orientation came in and took a part of the transitions curriculum and introduced it to all students. So all students were learning about LINC and LINC classes. All those new students needed that information, not just transition students. So transitions is a small piece of a very large puzzle. It's also not tech support or IT. It's important to still have those things. It's important to still have instructional design. All of those things are the key pieces of the foundation of a good LINC program and a good blended program. So trying to also not see transitions as a silver bullet for a problem as well, I think is key. Here's the big one. Embrace the challenges of the pandemic as an opportunity to start a conversation. So we all know that our teaching circumstances have changed dramatically over the past year, and there's good and there's bad in that. So what can we take from the good? Because we know that vaccination and coming back to school and having to wear real pants again is all somewhere down the road, but we don't want to lose some of the progress we've made here as well. So what do we keep and what do we leave behind as we move into a new kind of learning for our students? Because we've seen how some of them have adapted really well to this environment. So what can we take from that and what can we add to things like transitions and blended learning? So yeah, I mean, and the other beautiful thing is we have lots of great supports now too that we've seen over the last year. The work that Avenue has done with all these webinars and the help section, it's fantastic. The new help section on Avenue has been such a great resource for building things for transitions. I can't rave about it enough. All right, questions and answers. We're here already. I'm really curious to hear any questions or anything I can answer at all, any feedback. Please go ahead and add that to the chat. And I'll let Paul catch me up here on anything yes, pants. Time for pants again soon, I'm sure. And by pants, I mean not yoga pants.
Thank you so much, Maria. This has been fantastic. There was one question. A teacher was asking what steps you might recommend for, I guess, a service provider organization to take this on, to get started, I guess, how to implement it in programs where it doesn't already exist.
Absolutely. So when we first started out with this idea, and my understanding, and I can only speak to my side of it, but the teachers approached our administrator. Our administrator sat down with us. She went away, and then she called me up and said, okay, here's the proposal I'm putting into IRCC. And basically, it identified the need that our teachers were experiencing. It talked about what goals we were trying to achieve by establishing this class. And I mean, we got the funding quite quickly for it. So my recommendation would be ask, really just ask. And I think what I've seen from a lot of colleagues across Canada is there's been a lot of innovation with the pandemic. So programs have created support roles and resource roles um, for staff during this time where teachers are taking on like an online resource position or an instructional design position for their program. And IRCC has been quite generous with those proposals, is my understanding. So my big thing is just ask, put together a proposal and ask. And it doesn't have to be at contract time either. I know there are groups that have had put in mid-contract proposals and been able to get things.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question from Shelley. Can you share your experience trying out the self-paced approach? What has worked? What has worked, and what has been challenging?
Okay, so with the self-paced, that's a bit new for me. So I've just done it with a first group this January, and I didn't do a fully self-paced program. The class was a 5-6 class. Many of them were quite low 5, new 5, and then I had a handful of very high 6s. So it was quite a diverse group. So what I did was I set up a lot of online activities that the students were able to work through at their own pace. And in addition to that, I also set up a lot more online support hours than I usually would. So I pulled back, the instructional hours were still there, but a lot of the focus was, okay, here's a modeling of the activity. Here is some additional, so there's all that wonderful Avenue help support block that they can use as a resource. Here are times I'm available, but you're going to try the application first rather than us walking through it necessarily step by step repeatedly. So
That makes sense, thank you. Another question was to clarify, after the 5 weeks, where do the students go next?
So the students go to our blended classes. So we have a number of blended classes at the stage 2 level. We have full-time 5-6 and a full-time 7-8 during the day. We also have a part-time 5-6 during the day, and both 5-6 and 7-8 part-time in the evenings. So those, like I said before, were continuous intake. So those classes are going year-round, nonstop. And as the students finish transitions, they're moving into that blended class. So again, there's that piece too, that I have to be in communication with those teachers.
That makes sense, thank you. A related question too was, if there's no space in that class, the students just go back on a waiting list?
So for right now, they have been. We also do have non-blended 5-6 classes as well, though. All of our 7-8 classes are blended, so students do have to complete transitions to go to 7-8. Oh, pardon me, we do have a 6-7 available that's non-blended. Now here's an interesting challenge, and I think people will appreciate this. So our non-blended classes during the pandemic, of course, have now shifted online. And the teachers in those courses turned around and said, we would like our students to go through transitions as well. And they were turned down for that request. So there's another challenge. If the expectation going forward is going to be that IRCC would like our classes to all be working on Avenue, we need to consider how we support instructors and how we support that in our programs.
Thank you again, Maria. Brenda asked a question that relates to a question that Vesna asked, and it's kind of the first thing I thought of too is, can you share all this? Can you
Well,
talk to Jim? Maybe we could set up a course. You could import some things.
I could definitely put something together. Now you'll notice that during the presentation, I didn't refer to my employer. I mean, I'm here today as myself, and I would have loved to be able to show my course, but of course, for privacy reasons and with my employer, I can't do that. but I could certainly put together sort of a standard module that is something like that. Yeah.
That would be amazing. Teachers are always looking for things like this, and it sounds like there's a lot of work into this. That's really, really fantastic. A new question has come in. Who teaches the transition classes? Are your regular instructors doing this, or did you hire additional staff, or is that you?
That's me. So basically, right now we have one transitions position, and we've only had one. It would be lovely if we could have more than one, but IRCC has only given us funding for one class, and um, I was very fortunate that I was the one that that happened to get the initial contract, and I've been lucky to maintain that contract.
Thank you for sharing that. There were a few comments throughout the chat about funding and IRCC and asking for money and being refused. I was
Oh, that's
lucky.
very unfortunate.
Long time ago, I was lucky to work at an SPO, ISS of BC, where they had an in-house IT staff guy, but he was part of the English language program. So he was there to do computer labs with the students for the teachers. And his name was Raj. I'll never forget Raj. Amazing. But then guess what? Funding got cut. And so it's a challenge. This has been an amazing, amazing webinar. Thank you for sharing all of this. I don't see any more questions. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
I mean, it's definitely a challenge in our sector, you know, not knowing what things will be contract to contract. So I do encourage everyone to keep trying and try and gain those supports for your programs. And hopefully there's, you know, there is consideration given our circumstances that these things will continue to expand and grow. And we know that there is real interest in digital literacy as an essential skill now too. I do want to share quickly before we go some things that have been valuable to me. So in terms of resources, if you are considering putting together a proposal and you're looking for justification and you're looking for great examples about the successes of blended classes and programs like Transitions, there was a wonderful research study done by Dr. Jill Cummings, Matthias Sturm, and Augusta Avram, and it's on the Learn IT to Teach website, and it gives great examples of those successes. So I encourage you to take a look at that. If you're an administrator, it's a wonderful thing. If you want your administrator to take a look at it, it's very positive about what we can do to support blended learning. The Toronto Catholic District School Board has put some fantastic modules on Tutela. I encourage everyone to use Tutela if you can, but those modules are wonderful introductions to LINC and the portfolio and conferencing, and I've been able to draw from those as well in my classes. I did rave about the Avenue Help Block. It's wonderful. All the new videos and PDFs, very useful. If you don't want to use them exactly, you can adapt them to your own things. And I do just want to say that I'm out there on Twitter. I've posted an email address. If you do have questions or you want to share something that's worked really well for you and your program, I love to hear from people, and I'd love feedback and input. So feel free to contact me. And thank you, all of you, for taking your time to join us today.
Thank you, Maria. There's lots of thank yous coming into the chat there. And I have to say, I've been seeing your name in text form for a long time. And it's a pleasure to actually see the person behind the name. So thank you for all that you've done and all that you've shared today.
Well, thank
Really,
you, Paul. I
really useful.
appreciate having you as my wonderful support and chat moderator. And I know you and all the mentors are doing such amazing work to support our teachers. So thank you very much. And a huge thank you to Rob and Jim for asking me to do this, and for Matthias for getting the conversation started. So thank you all. It's truly appreciated.
Thank you, Maria. Could I ask you to stay on just for a moment at the end so that I can ask you a question?
Absolutely. Yep, for sure.
Thank you. I'm just seeing thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome, great ideas, fantastic,
Thank you all.
useful. So yeah, lots of appreciation.
Take care, everyone.